What did you get as an Easter egg, anybody?
Well, I'm not really an Easter egg person, to be honest. So, like, I feel like the chocolate isn't the quality I would want.
It's not the depth of that you would want, is it?
It's not. I feel like it's mass produced, so I just don't know if the chocolate is really where it needs to be for me. But I did get a little
huge slur.
Well,
News
do you not think so?
Slams egg
Easter
manufacturers.
Do you not agree? What did you get?
What did I get? I got one of those ones. I can't remember who made it.
Richard likes a really fancy one.
Yeah,
Skellig.
So it's probably not mass produced
full.
stuff.
It was full cake though. Like it was actually, it was like.
I actually didn't get an Easter egg at all. What I did get was an enormous box of Scott's Clan, which I was really pleased.
So you're not an egg person either.
It's not that I'm not an egg person, just that the shops were all sold out of eggs by the time.
Oh, I would have got you one had I known that.
What did you get for Easter? A lot of flack.
Well, so I did get a little go. I nearly got cancelled for Easter, actually.
Hang on, why?
My initials are now really controversial, incidentally.
Because you posted a photograph of your favourite.
So I got a little bunny, like a little white lint bunny for Easter, which I like the white chocolate. And I put it up with a picture of a cup of tea in my favourite mug, which happens to have a Z on it.
Okay.
Which is not a good idea in this day and age, but I didn't that did not occur to me at the time when I put it up, because I was like, in my innocence, I was like, this is my favourite mug.
So will you now be renaming yourself for the duration of this conflict?
I'm going to start spelling my name like the Citron Zara with an X, I think.
TS would do it, Zara,
XK, as if your initial your original initials weren't already valuable enough in Scrabble. You go for the other two. Hello, and you're very welcome to this week's episode of the Group Chat podcast from Virgin Media News. I am political correspondent Gavan Riley, joined in studio by the dynamic duo of news correspondents, Richard Chambers. Richard, hello.
Hello.
And Zara King. Zara,
hello. How are you?
How are we spelling your name now?
I mean, I'm afraid to stick to the Z. I might need to abandon the Z, I think.
Yeah, we're going to have to reissue all the podcast notes and stuff, so that you have to change your super on.
I didn't think I'd need to clarify that, but incidentally.
No, well, there you go. Listen, we're living in wild times, aren't we?
Yeah.
There's been a lot of news this week, particularly in the last 7 days or so, because ordinarily, I suppose you could say that when the dole is off and when official Ireland is off, that sometimes it can be very quiet, but there's been a lot of news going on. I mean, just looking at our notes here, there's the follow-on from the Kinahan story that we were talking about last week. There's the election in France. Obviously, there's everything going on in Ukraine. There's even the debate around, are they actually banning turf or what? So there's plenty to get into, but I suppose we probably should start with the aftermath of the events in Sligo of the last week. I know there was a couple of funerals at the weekend of the two men who met such dreadful deaths. And Zara, you were doing some work on this during the week, just about what appears to be a real an aberration, just the significant spike in the number of violent attacks that there's been in Ireland in the last couple of while. Yeah,
I mean, it just seems like the Garda Press Office has been issuing statements about assaults on a daily basis over the last week, which has been kind of upsetting and kind of shocking. And over the weekend, even I was working Easter weekend, and I was down in Limerick on Saturday. There had been a man killed in a fatal assault on Friday night down there. And again, another attack over the weekend. An English tourist who was attacked over the weekend. I was in court on Monday. I hadn't been in court in 3 years, actually. Much respect to Deborah and Sarah and Nicole, who cover our courts on the team, because I forgot the courts is actually, you have to pay a lot of attention in courts, actually, when you're working on cases like that. But I mean, there's just seems to have been an awful lot of attacks, and incredibly difficult for the families at the centre of those. I was speaking to Trina O'Connor, who is a criminologist, about this, and she was saying that actually there's been a lot of research from the last pandemic into the fact that there generally is a spike in crime actually after pandemics, which I was a bit taken aback by as well. But let's take a listen to what she had to say about that.
So I suppose, I mean, it's very sad for the families and the friends of the people that have been affected by this uptick that we're seeing in violence, and we're seeing it right throughout the country. I suppose we have to look at what's happening in Ireland in the context of coming out of a pandemic. Looking at studies from the last pandemic, we can see that there was an uptick in violence because people are very stressed. And when people's stress is heightened, that can lead to people being violent in a random way, lashing out against society, and that can really trigger antisocial behaviours in people. So I suppose when we look at community cohesion, during the pandemic we had to separate communities, people had to stay apart. Now I think we really need to be looking at how we can bring communities back to a sense of connectedness, to try and support people living together, making sure that people are in secure housing, making sure that the poverty that people are experiencing right now is mitigated as much as it can be, because poverty also can be a trigger for violent behaviour because of the stress that comes with poverty.
Yeah, that's fascinating from Trina O'Connor. It is one of just those things which you don't expect to be what follows on from a pandemic. But like, I suppose when it is something which is so all-encompassing and so huge that it is going to have so many different spin-offs that nobody could have possibly expected. And this is, a very, very negative one, which is clearly having an impact in at least some of these assaults which are happening across the country.
But you do forget as well that lockdowns and pandemics, of course, that they are health events, but the lockdowns that follow and everything that follows, they are, not to get too nerdy about it, but they're sort of sociological things. So of course that they are going to manifest in very weird ways for people. And unfortunately then, as we've clearly seen with a lot of people now who are lashing out in pretty extreme ways.
Yeah, I mean, even last Wednesday I was down at another crime scene as well, just in the north inner city, a woman in her 80s who had died following an assault there as well. So I don't know, I seems just personally for me as a journalist, I've covered more assaults in the last week than I think I've done in a single week in my career. It just seems to be a really
I just can't remember. I've been knocking around newsrooms now for 12 years and I can't remember there being a spate of so many high profile ones in such a short period.
Yeah, it's been really, really, it's been kind of frightening actually to see it happening.
Hopefully that's the end of that particular phase, and we're not going to see this as an ongoing phenomenon. There is one major development that we've had. We recorded this on Wednesday evening, and Richard, you were covering the story last week about the sanctions against Daniel Kinahan and his father and brother, and today in the sports world, one very obvious manifestation of the knock-on effects of that.
Yeah, things coming home to roost, I think, in the boxing world. MTK Global, which is the boxing brand, which was co-founded by mobster Daniel Kinahan. It has now announced that it is ceasing global operations.
Why? Because they say that they've got nothing to do with Daniel Kinahan, so then how would they be affected by anything that's happened in the last week?
They had one of the most interesting statements I've read in a long time.
Have you a few lines of it there?
I have a few lines of it here. As a business, we have faced unprecedented levels of unfair scrutiny and criticism since the sanctioning by the US government of Daniel Joseph Kinahan. They said it is a matter of public record that Mr. Kinahan's involvement in MTK ceased in 2017. There is some dispute about that.
I was going to say it's a matter of public claim by MTK, and very few other people seem to accept that account of events.
Yeah. So
that he's no longer involved in it. Now tell us, who's in that stable? Who are the big names there?
I mean, it's had a lot of people over the years. I mean, I think the golden goose, as Nicola Tallant, the crime reporter, would describe him, is Tyson Fury. Who is very
world
much
lineal heavyweight boxing champion.
Also brother-in-law of Molly May, for those who might be.
Oh my God, yeah, what a link.
Always bring it back to
Molly
the Virgin
May,
Media
who
One
also
programming.
went to, was it the World Irish Dancing Championships during the week?
Molly May was at
Molly May. So apparently, sorry, we're totally off topic. Molly May apparently did Irish dancing, FYI,
really?
As a young girl. I saw Carla O'Brien interviewed her.
When you have 24 hours in a day to work with Irish dancing,
well,
you can make anything happen.
Work harder.
Anyway, just in terms of the last 24 hours with this, Tyson Fury, who of course was pictured with Daniel Kinahan earlier on this year,
has tweeted in the past talking openly and apparently voluntarily about how great Daniel Kinahan is.
He said that Daniel Kinahan should be the Prime Minister.
Did he say that?
He did put that on Instagram.
He did not say that.
He did before on Instagram. Now he's like, oh, none of my business, nothing to do with me. And he tried to draw the parallel saying that, if somebody asked me about Ukraine, I'd say, well, that's not my business either. Despite the fact that, like, literally just 3 or 4 weeks ago, he was asked about Ukraine and openly answered in depth about how these other Ukrainian boxers who went home to defend their country were heroes, and that if the UK got involved, he would sign up and fight against Russia and Ukraine.
This is a slight tangent, but Tyson Fury can often be quite slippery in interviews, because I remember when he was trying to promote an autobiography in the past, and he had a really extensive interview with somebody, I think in the Sunday Times magazine, and they put it to him that, oh, well, in your book, you talk about X, Y, and Z. And Tyson Fury, just being naturally evasive in interviews, just went, haha, joke's on you, I don't have a book. And he had to be reminded, no, actually you do. You've just published a book.
He did not.
That's the reason why we're doing this interview. So sometimes his approach to the media
joke's
can be...
on you, I don't have a book, while he's
he's promoting his own autobiography.
So, yeah. But there has been
a
really interesting level of kind of unfortunate statements from the boxing world since all of this happened last week, with the US announcing effectively that the Kinahans are wanted men.
When you say unfortunate, what do you mean? Like, as in they're just
dumb?
Right, right. Okay.
The president,
so that's what we mean by unfortunate, people.
The president of the WBC came out with a statement, and he was like, what did he say? He distanced himself from Daniel Kinahan, and he said that he made an innocent mistake in meeting Daniel Kinahan out of absolute ignorance of the situation. Now, this guy, having met Daniel Kinahan a couple of months ago, said that he's really supportive of what Daniel Kinahan is doing in the boxing world, and that he basically said, "I'm not the police, so it's not my business."
So
and now he's like, "Well, actually."
So the head,
my bad.
The head of the World Boxing Council says that he naively bumbled into a full-throated, like absolutely unfailing endorsement of Daniel Kinahan as a promoter.
Yes, he did. But like these people, these people again, there's like they can be like, "Oh, I just didn't realize," and you're hearing that a lot. "Oh, I just didn't realize." It's like, this isn't new.
No,
it's been going on for how many years?
Like there have been some members of the Irish press.
I mean, I suppose there is that kind of like
ignorance
is bliss thing, isn't it? Sort of, if you don't see it, like you don't have to believe it, kind of thing. But that's not good.
So the ramifications clearly been felt, and it's probably going to keep on spiraling on.
Tyson Fury is obviously the most high-profile client of that stable, but you also have a few of the former Irish Olympians, the likes of Michael Conlan and Paddy Barnes, who've been part of the MTK books before as well. People who have, and this is going to sound like it's a bit of a vendetta, but they've been very heavy-handed with the block button indiscriminately against members of the media who are perceived to have slighted MTK. Yeah. Even if they've never actually. I've been blocked by one of them. I don't want to identify because I don't want to sound like I'm cribbing or moaning. I literally don't think I've ever covered anything substantive about the Kinahans or MTK at all, and found one day that I had been blocked by one of those boxers on Twitter, and I don't quite know why. But obviously those people are going to be affected. There are others, and we were discussing this off air, Richard, about how I feel, and I don't want to sound like I have kind of any sympathy for anyone who gets involved in those who have dodgy dealings, but boxing is a very precarious sport, particularly until you become very well established. That if you are new to the pro boxing ranks, it is a very precarious and often a very short-lived career. And if a lot of people,
corner, literally,
so for there are some people who are much further down the boxing food chain for whom this is their legitimate livelihood, who are now going to find themselves without any kind of management or oversight or guidance because of what's happened to MTK. But at the same time, they can't have got into the game, just as we were saying, they can't have got in and signed up with MTK, not realising that there were some serious suggestions about who was ultimately putting the strings in that organisation.
Again, I suppose the point you make there is that if you're starting out maybe and you're looking for a break, you take the break you get.
But like a lot of the like let's just focus in on Tyson Fury. Like Tyson Fury has people around him. He pays enough advisors, enough money
who could advise him
to know what he's doing.
Yeah,
he's treated questions on the matter, I think it's fair to say, with contempt. There was a Sky Sports interview he did the other day where he was just like, just flipping off questions left, right, and centre, like he's like dodging punches. It's just really poor. And like, I just think this is going to be something where a lot of people are going to be able to say now that, look, I'm only aware now that the US government has said that this is a thing. But reporting,
so they didn't care what the Irish High Court has heard in the past, or didn't care about any of the extensive reporting.
It's not even just an Irish thing. Like it's been the UK has been saying it for ages, and there's been good journalists around the world who've been carrying the banner on this. So I think it's going to be interesting to see how far boxing does go in sort of trying to distance himself entirely from Daniel Kinahan and trying to rewrite history, I think, as well, is going to be something to watch out for.
Speaking of platforms on which you can be indiscriminately blocked by people that you didn't expect to, is Elon Musk going to be blocking all of us very, very shortly? Because Elon Musk, this is about like the most significant corporate story possibly of 2022 so far, is that Elon Musk, the one-time founder of PayPal, now the man behind SpaceX and The Boring Company, literally that's what they're called, that's not a pejorative term, and dig Tesla holes. And everything else, they literally dig holes, they bore holes, that's why they're The Boring Company. It's a pun. He wants to buy Twitter, which has proven to be much more contentious a prospect than many people may have thought, partly because...
Why so contentious?
So Elon Musk is the bluntest way to put it is that he is a complete absolutist about free speech. And Elon Musk has got it into his head that Twitter is now the 21st century equivalent of the telephone. It is not a platform. It is actually the means through which people communicate. And Elon Musk has got it into his head that Twitter is therefore denying people their right to free speech by deciding who and who can't use the platform. Like, for example, Donald Trump, who was still the president of the United States at the time that his account was indefinitely suspended.
Yes.
And he believes that basically Twitter is now...
I think I still have a screenshot of that night from the account.
I think I've got the video where you're refreshing the page
and it's gone.
It's been suspended.
Yeah. I think everyone screen captured that night.
I think they possibly did.
Probably will be, realistically, yeah.
So he has... So if Elon Musk has got it into his head...
Moment.
It was. Not that we're at all gloating.
No.
So Elon Musk has got it into his head that Twitter now needs to be sort of taken to task in some way, because Twitter is the village common. It is the means through which all international discourse now takes place. And therefore everyone should have the right to speak. And a lot of people would think on the face of it, yeah, that's kind of fair enough. Like Twitter, and this is a major talking point for the last couple of years, how big tech companies have become gatekeepers to what is and isn't acceptable. And is it appropriate that Twitter or YouTube or Facebook have the right to decide what you can and can't see, particularly in times of elections, for example? And are they skewing the field by deciding what it is and isn't okay to consume? The problem is that free speech to most people isn't actually as absolute as he's making it out. Because you don't have the right to, you can't look down the barrel of camera 2 there, Richard, and you can't say that Gavan Riley drowns kittens. I mean, you could try to.
Does he want that level of free speech where, like, you can say whatever you want about somebody without any fear of
like, that's the consequence
a repercussion
of free speech.
So that includes
absolutism.
Trolling people and saying nasty things about people without any sort of consequence.
And outright libel. That, for example, if
Elon
Musk,
the model he's favouring, and that's the model
natural consequence of being allowed to say anything you want online could be that he could then stand up and say that Zara King drowns kittens. And even if it isn't true, or even if you actually had a record as being an animal rights advocate and that this would be a serious slur on your good name, there would be nothing that you could say back to it. So it does have other knock-on complications, because that
you
would
have
be
no right of
incompatible.
reply in that context.
Well, this is it. Well, you'd have the right to reply, but you don't have the right to sort of
have the defamatory thing.
Yeah.
You can't like just nip it at the bud the way that works in other countries. And ironically, Ireland is one of those countries where actually you almost can't say some things that are fair game to say because of the fear of libel action. But if you overcorrect too far in the opposite way, then you have a free-for-all where literally anyone could say anything at all they like on the internet, which is the direction that Elon Musk wants to go down. But what is almost more remarkable is the degree to which Twitter is trying to resist that, because he's talking about, okay, I've bought 10% of the company effectively. I actually want to buy the whole lot, take it off the stock market, make it my own private plaything, and I will control what isn't okay. And Twitter has actually gone out of its way to institute this mechanism, which they call a poison pill, which is that if Elon Musk buys any more shares, they will flood the market with new shares so as to dilute the value of his stakeholding.
Wow.
That they will go to the existing stakeholders and say, here, do you want to buy more Twitter shares?
We're not letting this guy take over, yeah.
Because they're actively going out of their way. They would literally be cutting off their own nose and devaluing all of their own property for the sake of trying to keep the company out of Elon Musk's hands.
And you know, obviously we see over time social media platforms, they kind of come and go, don't they? I mean, and they have their moment. Twitter's been one of those ones that steadily just sort of stayed there, hasn't it? In the background. It has stuck around. I mean, it hasn't sort of died the death that maybe, I know Facebook hasn't really died the death, but for some people it
Bebo.
has. You know, Bebo obviously is a good example of that. But RIP is a very popular website.
I think he's just. I think he's wishing a soft repose to Bebo. I think.
Okay, yeah. I mean, Bebo. Sorry, can we just take a moment for Bebo? I mean, it was iconic. No.
What was your flashbox?
I don't know if I had a flashbox. No.
Well, of course you did. Everyone had a flashbox. Most people had OK Go doing their dance in the garden on treadmills.
But anyway.
No, I didn't have that one, I don't think. Do you remember you could like select your best friend on Bebo and stuff? And like top 16s. Top 16s were highly controversial at the time.
And then you could share the loves.
Share the love, but you only have so many loves every day.
It started off as one love per day, and then
it
that
went
became
3, I think.
contentious, and it became 3.
Yeah, it became 3.
By losing it in much the way that Twitter is trying to do.
Remember, like if your friend moved you out of their top 16 or you got shoved down into row 2, you'd be like, that's the friendship done. Like
that happened to me. There was a bit of a league table set up. This is so.
You got dropped out of the top 16.
I got bumped down in the top 16. I got it to as high as 3 in this person.
Who did this to you?
I'm not going to name names.
No, don't name names, but tell us what was the relationship to this person.
A friend of them. And like I was up there.
Was it someone you fancied?
No, it wasn't.
Okay.
No. I got up to number 3 and then basically just started it when it was like, basically it was in the Champions League places. And I ended up...
Because it was only top 3 back in the day.
I ended up sliding all the way down to 16 and so others were skipping up and I was just like...
That's relegation zone.
Yeah, but like, I mean, just the idea that you're constantly ranking your friends.
I think it's actually
It was a very toxic sort of thing in hindsight.
Yeah, it wasn't great.
You were constantly
People
doing
wasn't great. Ruined my leaving cert, I'd say.
Constantly doing a top 30 hits of your friends, trying to see who's going to be dropping out into the Vauxhall conference next time around.
But I think the thing with the Twitter thing with Elon Musk is that he isn't giving up.
No.
And that this is probably going to be something which is going to hang around for quite some time.
Yeah. I mean, do you think it would change your relationship with Twitter if he were to...
I think it's one of those things where people talk too, like, not that they talk too much about it.
Well, both of you are probably one of the most, like, let's be honest, high profile people on Twitter in Ireland. Would it change, like, your feeling towards it? Would you still want to use it? I mean, how would you feel about it?
Like, I mean, but like the thing about it is like people are rightly concerned about how things would change, but like that would be saying that Twitter is good already.
Like I've taken it.
Twitter is already a troublesome sort of place.
No, I've taken a massive step back.
The funniest thing, is it funny or is it like tragicomic? That one of the things which has happened is that the other super large shareholder in Twitter is Prince Al Walid of Saudi Arabia, and he's out in a bit of a debate with whether or not Elon Musk taking over Twitter would be a bad thing or a good thing. This guy from a country which has very repressive media laws and all that sort of stuff, and now you're having a debate between Elon Musk and Prince Al Walid about
how much free speech you can have online.
We are living in hell.
It's a curious time. Of course, what Elon Musk could do if he ends up being rejected and the poison pill is activated is that he could spend all of his money buying Netflix shares because they've gone through the floor.
This is the most interesting thing which I've seen this week. That Netflix has just tanked.
Why?
I don't know how this has happened to Netflix. I'm quite surprised.
Because they're not. Are they losing customers?
Yes.
But is it because
they actually lost? They went down in overall subscribers.
It's not that the growth has slowed down. It's actually that they now have people leaving.
Their target for the quarter, and I just found this their target for the quarter was to add 2.5 million new subscribers, right? And worldwide. And when you consider the fact they closed Russia, so Russians can't go on Netflix. That lost them 700,000. If you took up the whole impact of the war in Ukraine as losing them, say, 1 million subscribers.
Okay. 1 million.
That would be 1 million, right?
Okay.
They were still, so they'd be down to, say, in an ideal world, they'd be adding 1.5 million. Well, they didn't add 1.5 million. They lost 200,000.
Oops.
Which is really bad. And like people are pointing out that like, is Netflix value for money? Some of this is going to come down to the cost of living. Like Netflix has increased its subscription fees.
And there was reports in Britain as well, isn't it? Some official statistics body that has found that people are now cutting the cord because they just can't afford.
How much is Netflix a month now?
I think the middle of the road package in Ireland has just gone to $14.99 a month. I mean, I remember signing up when it was like €7 or $8.
I'm one of these people who has subscriptions to stuff that I don't even realise I need to like.
I need to do digital, not a digital.
I know,
detox.
I think I actually have 2 subscriptions to Apple TV on like separate devices and everything. Like I know I'm actually not great.
It is just very interesting because like there's some of this is that people are going to be a lot more selective because the cost of everything is up. Now when you have this monthly expense, which is something which is frivolous, and there's other competitors out there like you've whatever other subscription services.
If you have any other TV package anyway, like the one that we work for example.
Well, I was just going to say about the one that we work for, and just to be honest, like I wouldn't have a lot, like we're out working a lot to be honest, so I don't have a lot of time to be watching the Netflix and the different things like that. But obviously Redemption has been on Virgin Media and we obviously have Virgin Media more since last week now, and just again maybe like there was an email sent out and I should have known about this internally, but like I can't get over actually how good the box set section is on the Virgin Media box. Actually, I know, I'm sorry. I know you're looking at me. No, it's not. I'm actually saying it because I didn't know. Like I didn't actually realise that. So I suppose like, you know, when you do have so many subscription services and then you kind of do with your own like TV package at home have so many
overlook some of the options and services that are there.
And when you actually go and have a quick look at what's actually there that you're already getting in your primary package, it's actually not more than you realise.
What I thought was curious about the Netflix thing is that they say that as part of their revenue protection thing, they're going to try and clamp down on what every millennial has done, which is basically share their password with someone else, so you can be logged in on multiple devices, so you can share your account with your partner or your brother or your parents.
Really clamped down, but you can't really do that now, can you?
Well, they.
Oh my God, you're smiling. You definitely do that.
Do you know what? I actually don't. Well, I'm actually reminded of his thing.
Oh my God, Netflix is stretching from Dublin to West Cork.
The Netflix buzz there. It just reminds me that you wouldn't download a car thing. So it's like you're like it just finds like, well, they're hardly going to stop this. Like I mean, I don't know how they're going to put a ban.
It's going to be very difficult to stop because people are inherently mobile. Like, you know,
but isn't it like you can't use the same account?
You spending some time in Dublin and West Cork. You could be legitimately moving from Dublin to West Cork. You could be moving from Dublin to West Cork or to Waterford. I could be moving from Dublin
people
to
are transients.
Kilkenny.
Or maybe Kilkenny from time to time. But those are legitimate places that you'd be. So it's very difficult then to render that as illegitimate somehow.
Heel of the reel of this is that Netflix may now soon have ads So
Wow.
Even when you're paying for it, you have to watch the
yeah,
ads.
they might have they might reduce
No.
the subscription. The talk is they might have a lower
I'll be gone now.
subscription fee.
I'll actually be gone if that happens.
if you're prepared to take ads.
I'm not watching ads if I'm paying for it.
It would kind of, to me, that would completely destroy the binge culture. That you'd never like sit down and watch 4 or 5 episodes of Drive to Survive or Queer Eye or anything else on Netflix if there was ads in between.
I hold it against Netflix. I have no sympathy for Netflix ever since they got rid of dating around.
Oh, we loved
a
that.
program.
Yeah, we loved Richard and I watched Dating
You're
Around.
gonna
We
have to
loved
explain
it.
this to me now. What's Dating Around?
It's a very straightforward dating show.
Yeah, but so basically it would be like a guy or a girl or whatever would go on a date, but it would be they would repeat the same date, wouldn't they, 3 times?
Oh, I think I saw
and
this
they'd wear
through
the same
Gogglebox.
outfit and everything
Yes,
3
okay.
times, and they would go out with different people. But it was actually really interesting to see kind of the dynamic between the different characters. We didn't always guess who they'd pick at the end.
That's why.
We weren't
It was
always
the
right.
least predictable of the Netflix dating
It was one of the
shows.
better dating shows, I think, in terms of like it was kind of somewhere between maybe First Dates. There was a First Dates element to it, I would say, with the dinner aspect of it.
funny
And
how Netflix has sort of
What a
developed a
podcast
bit of
this
a
is, by the way.
niche for
phenomenal. This is the greatest
What a
news. I'm
podcast
sure you're
this
learning
is.
so much about current affairs right now.
Well, isn't it mad how Netflix has developed a niche for like real sort of oddball dating shows? Like, what's the other one? where
Ultimatum.
We watched the other one, Love is Blind.
That's the one.
We watched that one, yeah.
Yeah, but they've also developed a really weird
We
niche
watched
for,
all the Netflix dating
for
shows
game
we were
shows.
together. Yeah.
I got like bizarrely into Awake, the $1 million game show that they'd commissioned, which was the conceit of it being people had to stay awake for 24 hours counting coins and then participate in a series of challenges which would exploit the fact that they were sleep deprived. And if at the end they were able to keep a rough tally of how much coins they'd counted in the previous 24 hours, then they would, one of them could
This sounds like a terrible show.
It's
sounds
strangely
absolutely-
compelling.
I don't think I'd watch
I'm
that.
sorry. I'm really sorry. We are on such a bizarre tangent
It's
here.
fine, we're
I
here
had to
now.
Google something there because one of our colleagues, Rob O'Hanrahan, told me about a new Netflix show, and I was like, I don't believe this is a thing.
Is it
What
fake?
is it?
Netflix. Okay, here's the headline from CBS News: Netflix series sparks debate about whether toddler participants are old enough. The name of the show is Old Enough.
The name of the show is Old Enough.
Unsupervised toddlers. It's from Japan. It's a blockbuster series, and it basically gets toddlers to go around running errands and completing tasks in busy cities. I'm like, what? And it asks whether or not they're old enough to be doing this. It's just absolutely mental.
I just don't even understand.
I just don't get it. It's like, what happens? Why are they commissioning this stuff?
Okay, well,
Would you watch that if there were ads in the middle of it? I don't know.
okay, well, I mean, yeah, no, so I wouldn't watch that.
Actual program.
Can I ask you, have you actually watched Redemption yet?
No. I
Oh,
haven't.
lads, please watch it so we can talk about it. Will you watch it, please?
Have you watched Is It Cake?
No, but can I just finish on Redemption by saying that I watched all 6 episodes because you can get it on demand. I didn't know this. Like, I feel like I'm declaring something that everyone probably knew. You definitely knew. I know in your face.
Well, I'm a company man, so you know.
I'm going to start reading the company emails from now on. I hope the boss doesn't listen to this. But the 6 episodes of Redemption back to back, so good, such good drama, and Waterford actor Mo Dunford is in it, and he's absolutely brilliant. He's scary, but he's brilliant.
Okay.
Yeah.
One of the stories that you were actually covering, Zara, over the long weekend was a fairly unfortunate twist about some people who had obviously made the very long and very arduous trip to Cork, come all the way from Ukraine, one of now around 25,000 people who have made that journey to come and seek refuge in this country, and managed to arrive into fairly substellar conditions.
Well, the conditions weren't necessarily the issue. I mean, they arrived, or they were in substellar condition when they arrived, as opposed to the actual location.
Yes.
Yeah. So this was a temporary camper centre that was set up in Bantir in Cork, and they arrived at around 8 o'clock on Saturday night. But as they arrived, they weren't actually feeling very well, and it was a gastroenteritis type illness, and they were actually very, very sick over the weekend. And 2 or maybe 3 people were hospitalised as a result of that. So really difficult. I mean, you're so far from home, and just anyone who's had gastroenteritis, absolutely horrific illness.
So it is worth stressing that this was a condition that they'd all contracted before they arrived in this particular centre, but just after the length of the journey that they'd had, and if this centre was going to be where they were going to be seeking refuge for a while, for that to be the circumstances that you arrive into is
It's pretty
awful.
it's pretty awful. I mean, in fairness, there was medical teams on site straight away, and they were given us the best of care on site and everything, and well looked after. But I suppose it just kind of speaks to the fact that it's been such a difficult time for people, and then to be arriving into kind of a communal centre like that. I suppose we've spoken about it before. It's just the type of accommodation that we're in a position to now offer people, I suppose, is not own door accommodation, and it's not it's people are doing their best, of course, and these communities are coming together and organising these centres, but it's not ideal.
But on that note, actually, Richard, we're recording this on a Wednesday evening, and you've been speaking this evening to the minister responsible for this whole programme, Roderick O'Gorman, and he's been underlining just how short accommodation is going to be now.
Yeah, I think like his direct quote was, "We're under real pressure," and that's been emanating really from government and people who are involved in the effort to try and provide accommodation to people fleeing from Ukraine. Like that is the mood. That is very much the reality of what's happening now, is that things are so constrained that we are now seeing places like the Mill Street Arena in County Cork now being used from this week. It's probably going to be full to capacity this weekend.
Wow.
And we are likely to see more of these centres used in the weeks ahead.
And when you say that it's full to capacity, because the intention for centres like that or Gormanston or City West was that it would only be a short-term place where you might be put up for a night or two after you arrive until they figure out where you can go more sustainably. And if they're going to have to start using that as interim housing in its own right, and it's going to be full within a couple of days, it just speaks to how chronically short the circumstances are going to be very, very soon.
It's very tight.
We've been here for this is our 5th week doing this now. Do you not remember, like week 1, we were kind of going, it might become really challenging, and here we are, week 5. Yeah, we're hitting breaking point now.
And
so
the
in
number
5
is
weeks,
still under 30,000. And if the numbers that are projected by government, which are into the 6 figures, do materialise, then we will have exhausted all the low hanging fruit, all the hotels, B&Bs, guest houses, and a lot of community centres very shortly. And then what are your options? And it's just going to be a serious ask for a lot of people. It's the French election this weekend. Who have you got?
I mean, vote for the one that you dislike the least, I guess.
Well, this is kind of what it's become.
I mean, it kind of has become that, hasn't it?
It has become a debate, like a contest about which one you like least. Like that's how it's become. So this is the second round of the election, which is this coming Sunday. In fact, on the evening that we're recording this, there is the final big debate between Emmanuel Macron and Marine Le Pen. So it's possible there could be something major that erupts out of that, which changes the dynamic. But it is remarkable that this is a contest not between two people who are both immensely popular and who have the winds at their backs. It is almost literally a case of which one of them is France
Slim
prepared
pickings
to
if you live in France,
for the next 5 years.
Yeah,
and but I think it was in the first round. I love the way that the French do these elections. That there's a first round and then top 2 go through. And then all the other candidates are like, we can pick one of these two. So vote for that guy.
It's sort of like what we have. It's like, but except you have 2 weeks to decide who your second preference goes to.
But it's just very.
We just do it straight away.
Yeah,
we're like decide now. Figure it out now.
Yeah.
Do you always vote, by the way, the whole way down when you vote?
Yes.
You just full page.
Yes.
Yeah.
Unless I make an awful mistake somewhere along the ballot, where I'm like, oh no, there's
You've lost count.
Yeah, exactly.
I generally do, yes. Because I just like the idea of making my ballot paper work.
No, so do I. I like to feel like I've used the whole thing.
What is kind of remarkable about France, though, and this is just indulge me for a couple of seconds in my sort of political nerdiness. It is yet another country in which the 2 established parties have just completely gone out the window. Because the best way to explain it to people who don't follow it, it's sort of like in Britain how for generations there's been the Conservatives and Labour, and they were the 2 parties that basically just rotated in and out, and they were the only ones that ever ran the country. And France has its equivalent. It has the Republicans, which would be the Conservative equivalent, and the Socialist Party, which would be the Labour equivalent. And between them, they basically rotated the country for the last 50 or 60 years. And in the last election, then Macron came along as this kind of new guy, this kind of, I represent something different. And people went, yeah, great, different, brilliant, let's go for different. And they elected him over Marine Le Pen. And because the other 2 parties just haven't been on the agenda, they've just completely dropped off the face of the planet. Like the Republicans, the French equivalent of the British Tories, came 5th in the first.
The party of Chirac,
the Socialists came 7th. That's the last party. Francois Hollande, the last president before Macron, was the Socialist Party. He came 7th.
Shocking.
So what they have now is.
Basically, as we're coming down to the end of things.
Oh, that's your running order.
Yeah.
But no, it's back.
This is everyone's favourite French meme from today.
So, So Emmanuel Macron's photographer has basically just taken to posting.
What's happening? Is that his chest?
Yeah.
Is that a cat?
No, that's
his actual chest.
Chest hair.
Yeah.
Why are you posting that? I don't know, France.
Oh, I don't know. I feel like they're going for the sex appeal factor with Macron.
I don't want this in Ireland.
I mean,
don't want this in Ireland.
So basically, what's happened in France, to put a cap on it, what's happened in France is that you have Macron, who is trying to become
I thought
the first.
that was a cat.
No, that's his actual chest, unfortunately. I really must urge people who are only listening to this in audio format really should check it out on YouTube or on the Virgin Media Player just to see that
about
picture.
5 buttons of a shirt up.
It's very
It's
French.
a bit much now.
So Macron is sort of maybe could be like.
I imagine Yo Martin doing that. Like seriously,
I
actually
didn't want to
don't
have to
imagine.
go there.
So it's
Martin
like
doing
Macron is a Liberal Democrat. It's like Le Pen is sort of UKIP, and Le Pen has been made to look more hospitable because there's now someone who looks like the BNP who makes it look like it's extraordinary. But if Marine Le Pen were to win, and it's
Screensaver now.
Keep looking at it.
No, I'm trying to take it off my screen. It's hard to do things and listen.
It's like filling your throat.
I'll keep drawing this analogy while you try to get rid of that image of Emmanuel Macron's chest hair from your mental
now.
mind.
So gross.
If Marine Le Pen were to win, Marine Le Pen says she's not in favour of this idea of Frexit anymore, but everything that she advocates would sort of require France to leave the EU anyway, and that would mean that the EU itself would be a pretty gormless empty vehicle if France suddenly decided to become part of
It changes the EU, it changes NATO, it changes entirely the entire
and
Western
it would leave
world.
Emmanuel Macron with a lot more time to deal with his chest grooming, which is a very
Which
important.
probably would
Which
be
is
one
everyone's
upside.
individual choice, and we don't.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Let's go into the mailbag because we just definitely need to just kind of cleanse our minds from that mental and literal image. Somebody has asked the question. A few of us have got this question. By the way, every week we are now going to do this. We're on Instagram. The day before we do the recording, we're going to pop up question boxes that people can send in ideas for stuff they'd like us to talk about or questions they have for the three of us. One question which has come up quite a bit actually in the last couple of days is how do you all park your personal feelings when you're covering a difficult story?
Oh, you want me to go first?
No, it's
Well, I mean, look, I think obviously it's really important for us in the job to, be able to kind of disconnect from it when you're at work and do the job. But I also think it's kind of important not to lose sight of having feelings and having a bit of empathy and human compassion. I think that's a really big part of the job, actually. So I think, like, yes, you have to park your feelings, as in, as journalists, like, we don't have, our opinion does not matter in this situation. Like, our job is to go in, find the facts, ask the questions, give you the facts, you make your own mind up. My opinion doesn't matter to our viewer, our listener, our reader, or whatever. So, I think it's important to park it in that context. But I also think as well, you have to be human to do this job. You have to care about people. Empathy, for me personally, is a big part of one of the biggest tools that I have in terms of doing this job. I don't know, would you feel the same way about it?
I actually have a great example of this, or just an example that's very recent to me, is like when I was doing the book about COVID last year.
A state of emergency.
Yeah.
No good
But like a lot of that was about people's personal stories. And a lot of stuff, like, these aren't people who are in the public eye. They are ordinary people like you or I or anybody who's listening, to whom the worst thing that'll ever happen to them happened. They lost a loved one. They themselves were very sick. And just when you're collecting and trying to put to words all these stories as they happened, I felt huge responsibility to do it and to do it well. Obviously, they're going to read it. I freaked out basically about putting the book out there.
Yeah, you did. You were stressed about that for that reason.
No,
at the time.
it wasn't just. I think stress undersells it.
Because of the responsibility of trying to tell their story?
Yeah, it's because they never asked to be in a situation where they're doing an interview about losing a loved one. Do you know what I mean? Whether that's a father, a mother, a grandmother, a brother, sister, all that sort of stuff. And I just felt this overwhelming thing. And like, I know we're all meant to, and people are always like, oh yeah, you should be able to disconnect and all that sort of stuff. I don't like, there's an element, as you're sort of saying, Zara, where you're not human if you're not feeling the emotion of what you're doing.
Yeah.
And I don't think you're connecting with the person whose story is being told to you if you're an emotionless robot in it.
No, you have to have feelings for people.
It's just a lot. It was just a lot to sort of go on. I think so. It was basically anything from the last 2 months of last year, first month of this year, very much just sort of like wrapped up in all that. It's really difficult, I have to say. And I just do think that you need to be able to sort of, I suppose, like, I don't think you can fully ever bring yourself out of a situation. Like, I spent hours, I was waking up in the middle of the night just freaking out about what people whose stories were in the book, how they felt about it. Now, in the end, everybody was really happy with that, and everybody was just like really grateful for the opportunity to do it. But like,
but it probably turned out well because you did care about it. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah,
like, I do think that's kind of
maybe you're able to channel the concern about it, which I think is possibly maybe where we all kind of have to be. That it's very easy to get motivated or to become emotional about the story that you're covering, but I think part of the knack of what we have to do is that you have to be able to channel that in certain ways.
Exactly.
So that
You're no use to anybody.
Motivation for something.
You're no use to anybody if like you are getting yourself to a point where you can't actually function.
Because you're overwhelmed by it.
Because then, well, you won't be telling the story properly. You won't be asking the right questions to follow up from things because you are just you're in over your head on it. But like, that's just an example of just one of these things where it just sort of the emotion of these things can be quite difficult to sort of unwrap yourself from. Have you ever found that yourself, Gav? Have you ever
there's actually only a couple of days that I can remember going home from work and being really sort of emotionally bothered by some of the stuff that I covered, actually. A couple of them were actually around the bank guarantee, funnily enough. I remember some of the days when some of the documentation from 2010 was published. I remember there being a long-running saga involving the European Central Bank not publishing some of the letters that were sent to the Irish government around the time of the bailout. And just being like going home and being really upset about this idea that some unelected Eurocrat somewhere in the European Central Bank or somewhere in Brussels could decide, well, we're basically going to kill your banks tomorrow unless you agree to cede sovereignty and let us impose all these draconian rules on how you're going to run your life. I'm kind of lucky enough. Generally, one thing that I'm quite good at is compartmentalizing, so I tend not to be able to bring work home too much, that I'm very in work when I'm there, and then when I go home it doesn't sort of follow me as much. But yeah, there's times where you like, and because they're few and far between, I remember them other times covering clerical abuse stories or safeguarding reports in different dioceses and seeing the extent to which people try to engage in cover-ups, and they do bother you, but I'm somewhat lucky in that they don't follow me as home as much as they do for
I feel like
guys.
the mother and baby home stories for some reason always get me. I just find those really hard ones to work on, actually.
I just see with that one, like with those, I just think there's an element of just stuff hasn't been processed.
I totally agree.
On a sort of a big macro level, but then it's just such individual horrors and awful situations for so many families.
Yeah,
but I think in this job as well, like, it is good. I know you're saying you don't like, you try not to bring it home and stuff. I personally find that like it is good to talk about it with people that you're close to afterwards, you know, that you can kind of decompress. Sometimes I feel like if you're on a big story and there's something like a big tragedy and you've been working on it for 3 and 4 days, like, just it's not the time to get upset. Like, you have to just stay kind of level about it.
You have to see the story through.
Yeah,
almost.
but you can get to the end of the week. Like, we would have been like that when we lived together during the pandemic.
You guys to tell your story for you, but you guys, when you lived together for most of the pandemic, you guys have been very open about how great it was to have someone else who was kind of in similar positions to yourself.
Yeah, even when you were writing the book, you would come home, like, you would be like, I suppose. And like, I made a documentary on COVID as well. We both kind of had done a lot of these personal stories during COVID that we were able to come home and kind of talk to one another about it and process it together, which was helpful. And I think the three of us being friends as well, to be fair, like, I do think we talk about it a lot, and I think that's really helpful. I think it's healthy to talk about it, and I think it's okay to get upset about it, actually. Yeah. You know, that's what I would say. So I think it's a really good question, actually, whoever sent that in. It is a great question.
Something which dovetails a little bit, actually, on one of your points there, Richard, is that someone would ask us to talk about the working conditions for non-consultant hospital or so-called junior doctors, because that's looking like it might be going towards industrial action, which is a story which feels like it's been running for literally a quarter of a century.
It's a never-ending story. And like, I mean, even I think one of the points which is always made to me by NCHDs, so non-consultant hospital doctors, is there any other job title in the country where you're describing people by what they're not? Like, I mean, what's the identity of some of the most valuable people in our health service?
Oh, well, you're not a consultant. Your hospital
or you're described then either as a junior doctor. It's like, well, a lot of these people are
quite senior actually in their positions and quite highly experienced.
It is like I mean, you can see the attraction for these people of going to Australia or going to the UK.
Yeah,
and a lot of them are.
Exactly. We were making this point, Zara, that this is something which is going to be a conveyor belt almost of many people.
I remember explicitly in May 1995, being in a car journey where I heard a news story. I was literally 8 years old at the time, and I remember listening to the radio news, and they were talking about how there was a prospect of junior doctors, as they were then casually referred to, going on strike about their working conditions. And that was May 1995. And the reason I specifically remember it is because I was going to a pub. We didn't have Sky at the time, and I was going to a pub to watch the final day of the Premier League season where Man United fell short to Blackburn Rovers. I got hit in the face with a pool cue that day. I lost half of my front tooth.
Wow.
Which is the other thing that I specifically remember today. But I specifically remember driving in the car, like listening in because I was going to hear the sports news, and they might talk about the big soccer that was happening that afternoon.
Yeah.
And they were talking about the junior doctors might go on strike because their working hours are so crazy. And we're still talking about it 27 years later.
Yeah. And these are people that we rely on so heavily. They're the backbone of the health service. I mean, you remove them from the system and it just falls apart.
Yeah.
And to be still in this situation and to, and especially at a time when a lot of these doctors are people then who have to advise their patients to take better care of themselves. And they'll tell patients, don't overwork yourself, mind yourself, wellness is really important.
Yeah.
And they're the same people who actually can't practice what they preach because of the terms and conditions of their employment.
Such crazy hours.
Yeah, which is I saw actually a friend of mine who's a doctor had tweeted something there recently where she had said that she was asked to work a weekend, and she said to the rostering person, look, I've worked the last 3 or 4 weekends, I'd really like to see my husband. And the response she got back was, well, like, your husband married a doctor, so like he knew what he was getting into. She's like, well, my bad, I thought my husband thought he was marrying a person, actually. So
wow,
and
just
that's
want to
really
see good doctors, because good doctors, as much as good nurses and other good people in the health service, is just such an important thing to the experience of people and their families who go through hospitals and could be there for a very long length of time. They'll always tell you who the good doctors and the good nurses were and how important they were.
Yeah.
I think that's just not great to hear.
Aside from the institutional idiocy of spending so much money and so much resources and putting so much expertise into trying to cultivate really good medical practitioners, and then making the conditions so inhospitable that you're driving them away again and losing all of the institutional input that you've had into trying to make really good practitioners out of them, and it just seems like it's such a wild way to do it. Final question that we have time for this week, and by the way, thank you for everyone who has sent in questions. Do please keep them coming. We will open, as I said, question boxes on our various Instagrams, so you can get in touch before the next episode. Emma wants to know, and this was a message that she sent to Richard's question box: how do you and Zara have so many unread emails? That would give me anxiety. I'm not going to lie, Emma, that also gives me anxiety because I freak out about how many notifications you have. We have been in the studio now for about 50 minutes or so. I have 7 unread emails. I have no unread WhatsApps. I have no unread emails or text messages. I have no notifications at all on my phone. Would you like to tell the class, Zara King, how many emails you've got unread on your phone?
So I have 256 unread WhatsApps.
That's not even unread WhatsApp. That's unread WhatsApp conversations.
Yeah, I have
256
unread WhatsApp conversations.
So if you've been getting in touch with Zara King and you want to know why you've been
I don't text anyone
unread.
back. So if I haven't texted you back, don't worry about it. I don't text anyone back.
Do not take offense to that.
No, honestly, you're in a really elite group of people that I don't text anybody back. If I do text you back, you're the real deal. 13,253 unread emails, which is nothing because you cleared that out not so long ago, really.
Because I do this every so often. I sit down with you in front of your Gmail and we mark all of your
I don't like when you do that
messages.
anymore, though. I think I like to feel the bulk around me now.
Like it's a comfort blanket.
I think it might be. He's worse than me.
This is the reason why you've missed all the emails about how good our internal TV products are.
Stop going on about that. I'm going to get fired out of
Richard,
this
how
place.
many unread emails have you got?
A nice round number, 33,444.
I salute you for that, my
Nice.
friend. I think
It's a nice
fantastic.
number.
It is a nice
Albeit
number.
a
Actually, I
horrifying
want
volume
to
of
stay at
unread
that. So I will start peeling back emails as they arrive in.
No.
Keep it at 33. I thought I did clear them out because I actually didn't realise until you put up that thing where you can just mark them all as read.
Yeah.
No, he's been going on about that for years.
Yeah.
That's his bit. He does that as a
we're
bit.
going to do it as soon as we're finished recording
but
here.
see, here's the thing. I also have a number of voice notes that you said you had a problem with me not naming them.
So before we came on air, you went into your voice note recordings and you have...
which I use every day for work.
Which is fair enough.
Yeah.
But you have 245 recordings,
Yeah.
none of which have been renamed. So you have...
No, there's one there.
yeah.
Look, I've named that one.
Okay. So why did you name that one and not name any of the 245 others?
I have one of my dogs snoring, my dog that died. Yeah, I named that one,
that's
so I
very
could find
sweet.
that one.
Okay.
I liked the sound of his breathing, God bless him. I've named some of them. That one's just called Zara Audio. Who knows what that means?
Just
They all are in a way.
They actually are.
Yeah, they are all in a way.
Okay.
I promise that if you do message any of us that, I can't promise it for Zara, frankly, but the rest of us will at least try to make some efforts to read anything that you've said to us.
I do read. No, sorry, people message me all the time. I do read the messages on Instagram. I just don't always get back to you. I try to get back to people on Instagram. I really do make a hard effort on that one.
If you do want to get in touch with any of the three of us, we're all on Instagram. Richard is at News Chambers, Zara is at zaraking.news, and I'm at Gav Riley. Do get in touch with any of your thoughts about this week's group chat and watch out for the questions box before next week's episode and tell us what you'd like us to talk about. But that is all that we've got time for. So in the meantime, thank you, Zara King.
Thank you, Gavan.
Thank you, Richard Chambers.
Thank you.
And thank you to everyone else for listening. We will see you next week. Bye.
Bye.